And boom, according to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. Good to see you all. I'm back. I'm back on my regular setup, although I had to sort of make some adjustments with the setup. It's a little bit messy, but yeah, I hope you can see the screen. Good to see we've already got Dan H here in the chat and 9 other viewers. So if you are viewing like Kerberos Tenchi, do say hello in the chat. It's always nice to see who's here. I'm back to the normal routine of speaking a bit more quietly into the mic. I know that some people appreciated being in a big apartment by myself in America, where it seems like you could talk loudly anywhere, anytime. But I could do that. That was, obviously I would speak more clearly that way. But of course, I have to go back to being a little bit considerate of being in a smaller apartment at the moment. Anyway, it's good to see you all. It was really great to do a show with Victor last week. For those of you who saw, we did our first 2.5 voyages, and someone said 3 years. I think the result of all of that is that going forward, I guess instead of doing like Tokyo Tonight every week, we will now aim to do a 2.5 voyages, probably just as a rule of thumb. If we make it like the first Sunday every month, it'll be at the same time slot of 10:30 p.m. So we'll be able to do that, and it'll be great to see everybody and to do a show with Victor again, to get that going. It was the number one thing whenever I met people. Sometimes the first thing people would ask is, "Hey, when are you going to do 2.5 voyages again?" It's good to get that back. I enjoy it myself, of course. It's great talking to Victor. It's great to be able to get that back going. And as you can hear, I mean, for us both, we've just been busy with life. But it does seem, by the way, my levels are really maxing out here, so I'm going to turn the levels down a bit because it's probably breaking up. This should be leveling. Was that the level? Just looking here, I'm just going to try to stop it redlining so much because that would be causing the sound to break up. Let's try that. Okay, that should be better. Now I can talk a bit more comfortably. Okay, so Dan H mentioning about the yen. We'll talk about that. That's actually something I was just talking about online just before this. If you're following me on Twitter, tech features. Trying to get the sound right, just trying to get the setup back to normal. But anyway, great to see we've got Dan H, Kerberos Tenchi, Jams. Good to see you, Jams. And Aaron, our moderator, is back. Good to see you, Aaron. Please rock in. Anyway, so great news anyway that we've got 2.5 voyages back. So that'll be the first, in principle, the first Sunday every month, or at least we'll try to do it once a month. And I will give up a Tokyo Tonight in order to do that. We can use the topics of the show, I think. In fact, it might just be fun to do what I do, just flipping through my Twitter and maybe asking for Victor's hot takes. That's always kind of fun. It's been an interesting week readjusting. I think I talked a little bit about some of the things I noticed when I got back. I was not even back for a day last week, so I've had about a week to process, and it was interesting myself because I kind of knew I was going to get some reverse culture shock. I mean, the thing about culture shock is that, culture shock happens the most when you don't expect it. And I was expecting it. I kind of knew it was coming, but you still, there are certain things that I must admit that I'd stopped. It's the things that you stop noticing about Japan, or that you forget about Japan, or that become, this is where reverse culture shock gets you. It's you don't notice things about your own culture until you've been outside of it for a long time. That's definitely the case with me going back to Australia and New Zealand. And this time, for the first time ever, it's definitely the case coming back to Japan. And some of the impressions I've had coming to Tokyo, and how they've been shaped probably by being in America for 5 months. And I guess these are informative, I suppose, for people coming from America. What have been the big impressions since I got back to Japan this week? First of all, first thing was, the heat. I mean, I knew to expect it was going to be hot, but honestly, the summer in Seattle is so great. The rest of the year is a write-off, but only the summer is good. It's like the inverse. Well, not really the inverse. Tokyo has some pretty rough, extreme seasons, but the whole year is pretty much a dark, gloomy, drizzly write-off, except the summer there is spectacular, and it's where you have sunshine and you can go outdoors, but it's like mid-20s Celsius, so it's very easy to handle. Coming back here where it's high humidity, Even when it's raining, it's above 30 degrees. We already had a 35-degree day yesterday. We're having another one tomorrow, which I looked up Fahrenheit just out of curiosity. That's like high 90s, above 95. We're having these days with high humidity, and it's going to get worse. We're not even into the worst of it yet. We're still in rainy season. Some people say, although noting that even though we're in rainy season in Tokyo, it's basically sunny every day this week. So we're not having much of a rainy season here. But of course, the worst thing, the only thing worse than rainy season starting is it ending, and it's going to end soon. And we'll be in for the full-on summer. So that's a thing that's happening. So yeah, the definitely adjusting to the heat was a thing. The other thing I think I mentioned last week was coming to Tokyo. I think I've been so used to, Greater Seattle's 5 million people. So, it would be the second biggest city in Japan if you take Greater Seattle. Although that's a bit like taking Greater Tokyo, of course. There are areas like Tacoma and, Bellevue and so on that are not really Seattle, but are kind of part of Greater Seattle. Seattle itself is like a 1 million person city. Yeah, it doesn't feel, well, in some ways it feels like a small city. The downtown area is fairly limited, I suppose, and the types of shops, you do feel like there's a limitation in what's available in some things. But just the general friendliness of strangers. It's one of those things that jumped out to me when I went to America, how friendly everyone is. Just strangers in the streets that just acknowledge it. Hey, someone does something funny, everyone looks around and acknowledges it, and it makes it kind of fun. It feels like you're in a musical sometimes, honestly. And it's kind of funny because, of course, Seattle is considered one of the least friendly parts of America in some ways. People talk about the Seattle freeze. It doesn't really refer to lack of friendliness. It just refers to how hard it is to make, proper sort of friends in Seattle, which is something that they have in common with Japan. But the general friendliness of strangers and all the daily interactions you have, not just in Seattle, of course, but throughout America, I'd gotten used to that. I'd gotten used to having all these sort of pleasant interactions with people that just sort of lift your day. And it really hit me hard that, people don't do that in Japan, or at least they don't do it in Tokyo. And the reason is obvious. There's 36 million people in Greater Tokyo. You can't have friendly interactions with each one. You'd collapse. But as a result, everyone genuinely does switch off. And also, you do notice, like when you're on a crowded train and so on, the things that used to bug me a lot that I hadn't experienced, I hadn't even thought about for 5 months, like just people being inconsiderate on the train. When you're dealing with crowds and 99% of people are being considerate to one another and everybody's sort of suffering through it together, but you occasionally get those inconsiderate people just sort of ruining it, the 1%. And feeling really irritated at those people. I haven't felt that in ages, but I haven't been crushed in a train in ages. I haven't involuntarily been pushing up against people or anything like that, which is, something you experience multiple times a day in Tokyo. So getting used to the crush and the heat and the crowds, and within that, people sort of being, just sort of inconsiderate about, for example, people standing up against the train door and not moving back into the train, even though the train's packed and there are people trying to get on the thing and pushing back solidly, even though there's room behind them, stuff like that. I felt myself getting really irritated by that. So just the irritations of it being hot and too crowded and everyone sort of being unfriendly and the 1% of people being a-holes. That got to me a little bit. Yeah. And I must admit, another thing which really stood out to me, hey, Ninja Monkey, our travel expert. So good to see you're with us indeed. I see you've been live streaming since you've been in Japan and going back. So yeah, of course, watch out for the Yakuza. That's another important one that I've been forgetting. Just another thing that I've forgotten about Japan. It's kind of funny. I only half jokingly, it's actually true. When I was in America, the highlight of America was Vancouver, Canada. Canada was the highlight. And the reason for it is that it's so nice to be in a city that's so well planned out, and it's just so beautiful to be in and thought through. The whole city is planned. There's parks. The layout is great. The design of it, buildings is great. You just feel like you're in a really nice place all the time, even in the downtown. Seattle kind of has elements of that. But, of course, the roads are a mess. The crime is terrible, and it doesn't hold a candle to Vancouver, which is just nearby. But it did strike me, like when I was getting a taxi back from Haneda Airport, and going on the C1, going on the highway around to come home, I noticed, the architecture. It's kind of funny. Tokyo is not like the buildings. It's something that I remember used to really bother me when I first got to Japan in the late 90s, that there are so many ugly buildings in Tokyo. I mean, it's kind of cool that the way that, everything develops so quickly, and there are standalone cool buildings, and, there are even famous architectural like landmarks that the architects from around the world come to Japan to come and see. But overall, even when there is a beautiful building, there's no planning or coherence of anything. It's kind of chaotic, and the vast majority of buildings that go up are soulless sort of, they look like storage warehouses, or, old buildings are not looked after. They're allowed to, run down. And everything is kind of chaotic and messed up. Now, that in itself is kind of part of the fun of Tokyo. It's part of when you're living here, you enjoy that. And the fact that the reason that buildings are very little thought is put into like long-term design and planning is that buildings, because of earthquakes and because of building standards and so on, mostly only stay up for 20 years anyway. So there's no point investing in an architect for a building that you're going to be tearing down and rebuilding 20 years from now. And, everyone just wants apartments to have the maximum floor space and whatever and have the same shape. So people just don't spend that extra time on making their buildings look nice. Sometimes they do, but generally they don't. And on top of that, the city councils and everything just don't spend any time at all in Tokyo on thinking about making, again, they do in small increments, and I think it's slowly improving. But when you think about how much turnover there is with buildings and so on in Japan, the opportunities for city planning to make the city, like Vancouver, for example, to make it actually genuinely an overall coherent, planned, nice space to be in. And this is really, I think, the opportunity that depopulation presents rural cities to make themselves more attractive and appealing to people from Tokyo to move to, rather than just handing out bribes. But in Tokyo as well, if they put in more aggressive city planning, which of course everyone would throw their arms up, against it and reject, but if they did it, they could make Tokyo so much more beautiful than it is. But honestly speaking, I love Tokyo, but it's not a beautiful city. And you really notice that when you're driving out, just what a complete mess of mostly ugly buildings Tokyo is, and the amount of concrete. Like even when you go out for a run, again, I've enjoyed having space on the footpath. I've enjoyed not being pushed up against people, and I've enjoyed seeing trees and that sort of thing, which you just don't see as much around here, and you could see more. There's opportunities for it. So those sorts of things are things that stood out to me. Another thing that stood out, I suppose, I was away for a few months, and I heard while I was away how there's less mask wearing, and there's definitely less mask wearing now than when I left. But in the neighborhood where I am, it still is about 50%. It's still, and I do feel that I think I went out to a pharmacy, to a chemist, a drugstore for Americans, and I remember in the drugstore, like everybody was putting on masks when they were shopping indoors, and I forgot to take mine with me, which made me feel self-conscious. So that was something that I guess remembering to take the mask with me. There is a thing when you're on the train, people are generally wearing masks on public transport, which, by the way, it's the same in America, or at least in Seattle, where I was. That is the one place where people still do wear masks, and it's mainly for that reason. If you have to get on a bus, that you'd carry a mask in your bag, and I still carry a mask around in my pocket, but thank heavens I don't have to wear it at work anymore. And pretty much, especially in this heat, as soon as you get out of the train station, some people do, and some people always will, because either they've got family members who are particularly vulnerable and they're taking extra care, and they're the people in that situation in both countries, as well as just generally people who have themselves colds that they don't want to spread germs, or hay fever or so on. So it's not quite back to pre-pandemic levels of mask wearing, but it's sort of coming down to that. I've heard some people saying in some parts of Japan it's close to that. The neighborhood that I'm in, it still is definitely COVID-related masking. And it's come down, but it hasn't gone away. The other thing that surprised me, by the way, was I heard about this law about bicycle helmets becoming mandatory for all people who ride bicycles, presumably even including, people who ride the mamacharis, the bicycles on the footpaths and so on. So I got a helmet when I was in Seattle, which I brought back with me, thinking I'd need it when I got back here. But I haven't seen a single person. I mean, it's exactly the same as it was when I left. Road bikers, people in the full Lycra bodysuits that look like they're about to do the Tour de France, are still wearing, are still wearing spandex and wearing helmets and riding in traffic. But people who ride on the footpath on the mamacharis, I haven't seen a single person wearing helmets, other than like the kids who were wearing helmets before. So that actually hasn't changed. I suspect that's going to be something like with smoking, how it's going to be sort of a a phased-in behavior change-oriented thing. There's no, although it's mandatory, there's no penalties for not wearing it, which makes some people say, so it's not mandatory. But this is kind of how Japan does things. They kind of create the mood for it, and when everybody's generally complying, they start to slowly ramp up. And this is what they did with smoking in the street, for example. You can't. It's funny, you can smoke indoors, but you can't smoke outdoors in Japan. And this was part of a sort of a manners campaign where, after sort of putting signs up everywhere and generally increasing awareness and pressure, they started having wardens going around reminding people and, cause some fuss. But I think that's the sort of thing that they're going to probably be doing over time with helmets until there is compliance. But yeah. Other than that, I mean, nothing really big. And in fact, I was just chatting earlier this evening with people talking about, what, in fact, Tokyo Rich, who's a journalist, was asking me, what have I noticed since I've been away that's different? And truth is, not an awful lot. Not in terms of news, I really hadn't noticed very much at all happening. Apparently, the stock market went crazy. I hadn't heard anything about that. I'd heard about the yen, of course, but the yen was cheap before I left. But that is continuing to worsen. I mean, inflation is a big story, and that's partly impacted by the fact that the yen is so weak. It's making things more expensive to import. But even then, stuff in Japan is still much cheaper than anywhere else. So, those are the things that I've sort of noticed since I've got back. Let's go back into the comments, and I'll start going through stuff I've been tweeting this week. Oh, including I'm not using Threads yet, but what can we do? Boom. Anyway, let's go in here. We've got tech features, indeed. Am I going back? In fact, let's go back. Am I going back? That's not directed to me. By the way, of course, if you want to get my attention, do what Dan H did. Just say my name. It'll flash up orange, and I'll pay particular attention to that. Question from Jams. How was my first run back in Tokyo? I did my first run last night. I actually pulled a calf muscle right before I was going to do a half marathon in Seattle to round up that trip, so I had to cancel that. So I hadn't run in 2 weeks. I've been trying to rest it and still felt a bit tight. It felt good last night. I mean, the calf, so in that regard, I ran really slowly. It was very hot, and even though I ran at night, I ran really slow. I kept my heart rate low. The best thing about running in Japan is, of course, anytime you feel like you need some water, you can stop anywhere. There is a vending machine just about like feels like 20 meters. It's probably 50 meters. But basically, there'll be a couple on every single block of vending machines with refrigerated or, if you want, heated drinks, even heated drinks. But you can get yourself cold water or sports drink or, like anywhere. And you use Suica. Oh, and Suica is wonderful. Americans use like Apple Pay and credit cards for everything, which are good. But Suica, just being able to tap an IC card is just so much better. That is something I am enjoying coming back to, and being able to use my watch or my phone to just buy a drink at any vending machine using the Suica chip and just tap and easily get a drink is really nice. In Seattle, people who are running in heat wear these running vests which have water and stuff in them. And I bought one of those, and I might get them if I do. I might use that if I do trail running. But if you're just running around the city, you don't need it because you can just get drinks from vending machines anywhere, which is wonderful. So thanks to the vending machine, it was survivable. And I'm looking forward to getting more into that. In fact, I was just looking this evening at 5K runs in Tokyo, and there are lots of them. Although I did notice the vast majority of them seem to be aimed at small kids. They're literally all for elementary school students and stuff. I don't see a limit on adults participating in that. I found that a really fun way to do runs. So I want to look for some 5K and 10K runs that I can do. And honestly, what kind of kid wants to do a 5K? I don't understand that at all. It sounds like they're being forced to. But my first run was good. It was just nice to run around the old neighborhood and get my get into the groove back of running in Japan. A bit more of a hassle here, of course. After I run, especially at night, I have to go out and use a coin laundry, and I have to spend, you get sweaty again after having a shower going outside. Just because at night time you don't want to be inconsiderate to other people at the apartment building. So I didn't have to worry about being so considerate when I was in America. So I could just exercise anytime. That was kind of nice. I guess that was a nice thing about living alone. But getting back into the routine. Everything is just slightly more of a hassle here. You just have to plan the timing and logistics of how you're going to shower, how you're going to change clothes, how you're going to wash your clothes. And honestly, if those things were more easily solved, I would do a lot more running, like when I was at work or something like that. But figuring out, you don't want to carry clothes here are just saturated when you run in this type of humidity. So figuring out how to find, I really wish in my building that if there was a coin laundry inside my work building that I could just wash my clothes and shower. That would just make life so much easier. But anyway, that was a thing. So yeah, anyway, going back down the comments, Dan H, I don't think it's a coincidence that the yen got stronger as I left Japan and the weakened since I returned. Yes, it's all my fault. I've been secretly printing Japanese yen. Yeah, the discussion I saw tonight, someone pointed out that the weakening of the yen almost directly correlates with the US Fed interest rate increasing to 5% gradually in steps, which I suppose makes sense. I don't know why Japan, like printing money like crazy, actually hasn't had more of an effect until now, and I guess I still don't understand that. But yep, that was definitely me. And Tuesday, Erin is coming to Japan, and you are going to have a reverse Japan culture shock. Yeah, you have fun with that. It's going to be, well, I think if you've been away long enough, I think it might be more fun coming back to things. It'll be interesting to see what it's like for you, indeed. So yeah, going down the comments some more. We've got Ninja Monkey. Anyway, great to see you. Am I missing anyone? I said Cobra Stench, you're ready. Do say hello if you're in here. We've got Keto Krua. Hello from Chicago. Good to have you, Chicago. Early in the morning too. Do appreciate you joining. Cobra Stench, bicycle helmets should become more popular, but then again, if it turns out anything like Germany, they won't, and cyclists will drive even more aggressively. Well, yeah, so the difference, of course, in Japan is that the majority of people who cycle on the footpath. So this is partly why people feel like they don't need helmets, because frankly, it's the cyclists who are more of a danger to pedestrians. Of course, when you're on the road, though, and even when you're crossing, there are so many accidents where people get serious brain injuries, and this is why the government's mandating this. And this is, I'm sure, is going to end up being part of the campaign for this. But most people don't cycle on the road in Japan, and they don't cycle aggressively vis-a-vis cars. So I think cycling is kind of different in Japan to what it is, at least in New Zealand and Australia. I'm assuming Germany is maybe a bit like that, where people cycle on the road. I think of countries like the Netherlands, which are really cycle friendly, where there are like dedicated cycle lanes, and perhaps it's not necessary. But I think Japan is probably more like the Netherlands. I don't know if Germany's close to that or not. But yeah, Dan H, your thoughts on Fujitsu, asks me for my thoughts on Fujitsu issues with the My Number ID scheme. Yeah, I actually have many thoughts on that. That's a great topic. And in fact, I talked about that during my topics this week. So let me come back to that. Sainted Sir, hiya. Hello, it's Sunday morning, 10 a.m. in NYC. Kind of hot here too. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's, well, cold in the Southern Hemisphere, but definitely hot right now in Japan. And I'm not surprised to hear in NYC as well. Yeah, Sadiq, good to see you, Sadiq. Hello, Japan, good to see you. And John Carlo Lanoy, good to see you. Hello there indeed. And we are caught up on the comments. So yeah, so again, I guess one of the big news stories that I should have actually mentioned before that's been going on, kind of a predictable, it's a bit like that Austin Powers scene of the really slow steamroller rolling someone over in very slow motion. Watching the My Number system roll out and all the problems that have been going on with that. It is kind of funny how essentially the government and different prime ministers have realized that the most popular politician within the LDP, generally with the public and public polls, has been Taro Kono, and Kono Taro, as he likes to be called. And they've tried to hand him a bunch of jobs. They've tried to exile him to the press office of the LDP. They've tried to give him sort of jobs that they assumed would go nowhere, for example, being the Minister for Administrative Reform and other sorts of jobs. And every single job that he's taken, he's turned into a PR opportunity and found ways to get quick, easy wins that generate positive publicity and reinforce the image that he's a politician uniquely able to get results, which has enhanced his popularity in spite of being given jobs that appeared to be jobs designed for him to fail and to sort of torpedo his popularity. So after sort of surprising people with succeeding in different roles, they gave him the digital agency role, and the main mission of that, the digital agency, has been the rolling out of the My Number system, which the Ministry of Finance wants. They want everyone to get a social security number. For the same reason as it, like in America, it becomes like a master database number for tracking everybody across different government systems, as well as, for example, for banking and medical insurance and stuff like that. Mainly as a way, I think if the government's being honest, the main incentive for the Japanese government for this is that the Ministry of Finance wants to be able to better track and tax what people do. They want to be able to track people's bank accounts and find out if they're getting cash money that they're not declaring as income, and collect that tax money is what they really want to do. But of course, what this entails is for thousands of central Japanese government systems, and tens or hundreds of thousands of local government systems and private systems around the country, it requires the integration of all of these systems with a sort of single universal my number, social security number system. And in many cases, the creation of new systems to be able to do this, where they would sort of done manually. So part of the updating of all Japanese government IT, which is desperately out of date, it's kind of presented a huge opportunity for the Japanese IT industry to sell lots of new IT work, in order to enable every database to have a database that contains the my number on it. But here's the thing, and I say this as someone who has actually done system engineering and rolled out ERP systems. I used to work in SAP and have done SAP rollouts in 2 companies in Japan, Bridgestone and Mitsubishi Materials. So I've got a pretty good idea from pretty hard-earned experience. Plus, I've worked at Accenture. I've worked at other companies that do these sort of big implementations, including I was actually legal counsel for public sector, for government IT. So I've got a pretty good idea of how government IT works and how these sort of projects work. So yeah, I can talk a lot about this actually, but I'm lucky. I don't know that any specific. I haven't been involved in any specific my number cases because I haven't supported it since that came out. But generally, what happens is it's really, you think it'd be easy if you've got a database, a database of all the information you have on a person. For example, their date of birth, their bank account number, their balance, the dates of all their transactions or whatever. You think, oh, well, now we have to track a my number for that as well. We just added on, right? That's true, but for most databases, there are databases like dynamic databases nowadays where you can just add parameters to them. But most traditional databases are structured where if you want to change the parameters or add a parameter, you have to take all the data out of one database, which is like a great big spreadsheet, and you have to put it into a new spreadsheet with an extra column. And you need to make sure that extra column has all the correct data and it's aligned correctly with all the other data. And this is you have to migrate this database. And then have all your systems cut over and work and not lose all their assignments, that you get this data from that parameter and this data from that parameter when everything moves from introducing a new parameter. It's actually a big deal and a huge pain to introduce a new database, a sort of core field, particularly something like this, which is intended to be like a key central database figure. And so, yeah, it's the inevitable has kind of happened, that there have been mess ups. Japan has a long history of failed IT migrations. The one that really stands out in terms of government that was public was the pension system migration, where they migrated from sort of offline, from paper-based tracking to online tracking. And in that case, I think it was NEC. It might have been another company, but I think it was NEC. Did a whole bunch of manual entry. They had thousands of people manually entering all of the pension details into a system. And it turned out there were so many mistakes in the system that came across, and so much information had been lost during the paper record storage phase of it, that the whole thing became a complete disaster. They couldn't actually use the system that everything was migrated to, but they had also stopped using the old system, and the whole thing sort of fell apart, and it took years to remediate. And it appears, and it was kind of inevitable, I think, that it was, how could it not happen, that the same thing was going to happen with setting up the My Number system and integrating it with every government database. The company lucky enough to be at the center of managing the central My Number system was Fujitsu. And it's kind of funny. What kills me about this is that there's this kind of a paradox, that Japanese IT always takes the SAP projects that I used to do in America would take 3 to 6 months to implement, integrated systems where everything's all connected by the same databases. Generally 3 to 6 months to implement. In Japan, it takes 3 to 5 years. And the reason is usually that Japanese just won't accept the standard system. They won't change their businesses to adapt to the new IT system. Most companies, when they implement a system like SAP, they'll think it's a good opportunity to improve their systems and to sort of change how they run the companies to make themselves more efficient. Managers will generally come in and say, hey, yeah, we should follow, industry best practices that are set out in SAP templates. And, that'll also increase the success of the system. Japanese companies are different. When you go to a Japanese company, The mentality is that an IT company has nothing to tell you about how you run your business. They have to make their system, their software work perfectly with what you do, not the other way around. And so they won't accept any change. They demand everything get customized. And the more you customize things, the more things fall apart. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny. And I'd be on these projects where people were working to death. And yet at the same time, I'd have American colleagues saying, yeah, on those Japanese projects, though, they just take a long time because no one's really doing anything, are they? People are doing lots of things. They're just not doing it. Partly it's because the customers are not accepting the standard systems, but partly it's because there's so many extra layers of testing and extra layers of proving that an idea works and so on. And it's so hard to get sign off on every single system. So I'd always tell people that the thing about Japanese IT is that it takes longer because people are so much more conservative. There's so much more checking and testing and so on. And yet at the same time, it seems particularly prone, mainly because it's so manual, that you end up with these sort of IT disasters based on mistakes where data wasn't, again, when Japanese will pride themselves on being these type A blood type, attention to detail people that don't make mistakes and are super, tough and triple checking everything manually. Yet again, just because they're doing it this old fashioned way, it's particularly prone that they still messed up, just like with the pension system. It turns out they messed up with the My Number system, and there's been so many examples now coming up where numbers were assigned to the wrong people or the wrong insurance. You put in the number and you get the the residence certificate of a different person, or you get the wrong person's medical insurance, and all of these mistakes were made by Fujitsu. So two things about Fujitsu specifically. First of all, it's Taro Kono's the one getting blamed for all of the failures, the failure to manage the IT project, which I feel kind of bad for him. I feel like this was sort of handed to him to fail because these things happen all the time, and it's really Fujitsu that failed. And in terms of Fujitsu failing, I love Fujitsu. I've worked at Fujitsu. I've worked as an in-house seconded counsel with them for a year, 6 months inside the company and 6 months part-time. So I do like the culture of the company and the people. That said, Japanese IT is basically dominated by 4 or 5 companies. It's dominated by Hitachi, NEC, Fujitsu, NTT, and wait, there's one more. NTT, Fujitsu, NEC, Hitachi, and I'm missing one. But in any case, it's a very small number of companies that have a questionable history. If you look at the number of times that they've been convicted of like bid rigging, where it's basically understood that all the work from that ministry will just go to that company, and this company will take all the work for this ministry, and we won't really seriously compete. And the result of that is that these companies have really not had to compete for work, and they've not really been pushed, and often they've made money by just having these government systems continuing running on 1970s and 1980s technology that they just maintain, that they are the only ones who know how to maintain as a way of locking in the work and frankly being able to charge whatever they like and not having to work that hard or actually innovate or do anything new. And now they're being forced to do things like using digital transformation and cloud technology and actually build new systems. I think a lot of the companies that have been doing this government IT work have lost the muscle for doing that because they haven't had to be innovative. They've actually been proactively holding back Japanese government IT and cooperating to not compete and to basically screw the taxpayer out of money. And the result of that is that they're not good. They're not as good at this sort of thing as they should be. Fujitsu getting a particular bashing because the company that they took over in the UK has also had some huge government IT failures over in the UK. But NEC could have been NEC or Hitachi or anyone else or NTT, just the same as it could have been Fujitsu in this case here in Japan. But all of them at the moment, there's this big problem that these big companies are really the ones responsible, I believe, for holding back. The reason that Japanese public services are not digitized in Japan is so obviously lagging on IT is that these companies have been holding them back. And, and I think that this is symptomatic that they're doing things the old-fashioned way of doing everything manually, and they've screwed it up. And Kono seems to be getting the heat for it, but it really is Fujitsu And I don't know that Fujitsu could do it any better if you're giving it to another company. And the thing is, okay, so you say they should give it to a more innovative company that, is better with more modern technology, which would be a good idea. But, the way that they're doing these things that require so much manpower, that there aren't many companies that could sort of do that. Again, I'd like to think that there are small companies that could automate these migrations and do it more, do it better. But yeah. I think they're pretty good at convincing that it has to be one of the big four, and they'll handle subcontracting where it's appropriate. But again, this kind of thing, this is why Japan is falling behind in tech. It's because, frankly, these large IT companies, which used to be very innovative. I mean, Fujitsu's, in the 80s, was taking on IBM and beating IBM at making mainframes. They were large, innovative, technologically advanced companies that were beating the world, but they got fat and lazy on their technology that they innovated in the 80s by just stopping working and just kept on selling the same technology. And I believe that's why they're screwed over. So that's a very long answer to your question. Thanks for asking it. It's a topic I care about. But there you go. Ask a question and I will over answer it, Dan H. So yeah, who else we got in here? We've got more people in here. Thank you. Remember to like if you like. I do appreciate I do appreciate it. Do as Aaron says. Shubus, I'm glad that you made it. Buenos dias. Good to have our man from Panama here. Men's swimwear. Good to see you. Yo, indeed. Cyclists, they ride wherever they like. Good to see that. Like button appropriately smashed. Glad to see that. Milchman too. Welcome back. Good to be back. Ben Duncan also got fat and lazy. Well, let's face it. In a way, we're all Fujitsu. we all wish we could just figure out a way to just make our work easy and just kick back and let the dollars roll in and not try very hard. But sometimes we need to go on a diet, and maybe that's what what Fujitsu needs. Buenos Spectaculo says Slake Manson. Good to see you, Slake Manson. So yeah, anyway, what have I been tweeting about this week? In reverse, so from today backwards, this headless corpse found at a hotel where police, the original story is police suspect murder, and everyone was like, you think? I mean, it's missing a head. I think that's a big clue. But it could of course be hairdressing without a license. Apparently, Time Out Tokyo going for some serious clickbait. Apparently, some French global tour guide says that Fushimi Inari Shrine, the shrine with all of the gates, is like the worst tourist spot in the world. I've never actually been there myself. I've been to Kyoto. I didn't visit this one. Makes for good Instagrams. I don't know how it could be worse than that river in Cleveland that catches on fire from the tourist video. But apparently some French person was having a very bad day and decided to make that the worst tourist site in the world. Maybe it was crowded. It was certainly probably hot. I can sympathize with that. I'm actually just realizing now that part of the screen is cut off from this. I've got to align this better. But anyway, there are 5K fun runs in Tokyo, so I'm looking that up. I see there's some more comments here. When am I going to try some geisha coffee? Yeah, geisha coffee. What is geisha coffee? I don't even know. If it's a geisha making coffee, I mean, I'm up for it any time. But I don't know. I think I'd have to get a Kyoto for that. I'm not sure. Kato Kra, while in America, did I see any news about Congress and the UAP UFO? Are there any big sightings in Japan? Yeah. I'm an astronomy guy, and I find a lot of the I love space stuff, but a lot of the UFO stuff. There's a channel called Joe Scott, or Answers with Joe, and he's done a big sort of summary of a lot of the Pentagon UFO video things that came up, and sort of again, a bit of a party pooper. He showed some of the best explanations for how to debunk them, including things where, for example, objects that appeared to be moving and flying in the air from fighter jet sort of gun cameras and so on could be explained as being internal reflections off the glass, protector on the thing. You could actually see the motion of the camera itself. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that's convinced me that there's anything to that. Again, I don't know about anything like within the last month, but I think I saw a few things recently where there was some hype, but I've never seen anything. I used to be super into UFOs when I was a kid. but I don't see anything around that. Japan is famous. Japan is a place with lots of UFO enthusiasts and used to be a place considered to be a hotspot for UFO sightings. And of course, Japan has lots of weird weather phenomena. You get things like ball lightning, and you get weird clouds from the mountains and the weather patterns here. So yeah, there are places in Japan that have that are considered UFO hotspots, including Mount Fuji itself. But nothing particularly new or recent around that. So yeah, I want to believe, but I don't. I want to. I would if I could, but I can't. So I won't. At least for now. I haven't seen anything persuasive on that. But yeah. If you're into it though, there is definitely stuff out there in Japan. I'm going to tip the geisha too. Not in Japan. I don't know. Maybe I should. I mean, if it's a robot geisha, I might tip. That'd be kind of fun. I've just realized something. Is this something that I can't like scroll down my own tweets? Give me a sec. Let me see if I can. Is this something that Elon did that I can't go and see more than 6 hours ago? How am I supposed to see my older tweets? I was going to go through and see all my tweets from this week. Oh, they are loading. So there's something with my main page here with the tweets not loading. But come on, let me see my tweets. The whole format of the show is based on me scrolling through tweets over the last week. And now Elon, why do you do this? Seriously. Is this how he's trying to make me pay for a blue check mark? I mean, okay. I don't know. This I'll keep going through what's on here anyway. One thing that really struck me when I got back actually was every news story seems to be talking about I will look up the geisha coffee. Thank you for that, Shubhas. I noticed how every news story here is talking about, like, they tag on World Business Report how companies are looking at ways of selling things to young people, and AI is sure to be a big part of how they're going to do that. Now, are you using AI? And people are just throwing the word AI around like it's this magical thing that's going to fix whatever problem it is that you have. Do you have something on your back? Well, I mean, actually, that's literally something that you could use AI for. But what I've noticed is that while there's, of course, this huge AI hype cycle happening at the moment overseas, the way the term is being used, like, on every NHK news and World Business Satellite or whatever, the news shows in Japan, it seems like every story, everybody's talking about, if we just use AI, we can fix that problem. And I listen to it, and I work, in an area that's kind of deeply involved in AI, and I've been working closely with it in America. And, typically, again, just because it's become a kind of almost a cliche hype word, people have always said machine learning in the field that I'm in. But yeah, what they're talking about is ChatGPT, and they're talking about these large language models, and they have this idea that now that these large language models appear to be able to automate human thinking, for any job that requires someone to think, we're just going to use AI, and it will tell us all the answers, and it'll be more reliable than using a person, and that will give us better ideas. Seems to be the theme in the use of, we need to use more AI, especially now that we have AI, which we didn't have last year. I find it kind of annoying on multiple levels. One, I mean, there's been AI since like the 1950s or 60s, and there's been like different sorts of machine learning models that do different functions of AI, of machine learning, different types of automated and artificial intelligence. Like, for more than 10 years, being used a lot by government and by academic institutions and companies. Now, these LLMs are cool, and I love ChatGPT, and they are amazing. And the idea that I can just natural language ask it to code me a program and get it to work, that's cool. But what I'm finding from using these sort of LLM type AIs like ChatGPT is that when I use it, for example, when I test it out to see if it can draft me a contract or draft me a clause in a contract, or if I ask it to code me a program, I always find you can't trust it. You can't trust it to get it right the first time. You have to check it. You usually have to clean it up. And a couple of times you'll have to ask it to do it again. And the reason is that we don't really understand how these things work, and why, even when the correct answer to a question is in the training data, how it will randomly hallucinate incorrect answers sometimes and be convinced that they're real and tell you that they're real. And you need the ability to be able to verify it for it to work. And the only way that you can stop it outputting a mistake is basically to play whack-a-mole and set up like a manual fix that, oh, if you're going to say this, instead say this, which is what OpenAI and Microsoft and so on are doing at the moment. But that reflects that you can't automate, the decisions of a person. It's not working well enough to replace people. And while its accuracy is improving, accuracy isn't inherently like what these models are about. And I don't think you're ever going to be able to solve the hallucination problem. All you can do is just brute force, keep adding corrections to it. I think that these things will get better, but in terms of being something that you can automate for something like, medical advice or legal advice or coding, I can see how they're very useful tools with people who know what they're doing, supervising them. And I can see that they will improve. But at the moment, I'm wondering, it's possible that LLMs are not the way that we get to automated humans thinking. And there's all sorts of other branches of machine learning which might get there. this is a really exciting area. But the way that I'm kind of surprised that the hype sort of seems, if the government just uses more AI for this, and government departments talking about processes that they can outsource to AI, it's like it kind of tells me that you don't know what AI is. If if you assume it's like a magic genie that can do everything for you, it's really exciting tech, and it's good to see the investment in it. And the interest in it, but and hopefully as people use it, they'll become more sensible and a bit less naive about it. But at the moment, it's great tech, but I find the hype cycle here is actually bigger than in the US. And there's another thing about Japan that I like that's connected to that, which I think the Japanese are actually more technophilic, I don't know. People in Japan like technology and inherently are more ready to trust technology, I think, than Westerners and certainly Americans are. They're more willing to have, the idea of robots looking after elderly people and having AI help doesn't creep Japanese people out. There's something about Japanese culture about, I have a token folk theory on this that, traditional Japanese culture, Western religion, not just Western, even Eastern religion, all the Abrahamic religions are based on this idea that from the Garden of Eden, humans were separated from nature by the fact that we know the difference between right and wrong, and we're accountable for sin. And so humans were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and we sort of became this sort of separate entity from nature, and basically there's this idea of what's natural, what's unnatural, and the idea that humans have to control and dominate nature and whatever, and it's unnatural to rely on non-human things to help you with certain things. Japanese, culture and folk religion has always been based on gods existing within nature, and inanimate things as well as animals and nature, and kind of being more in harmony with nature. And I think this is behind Japanese, being willing to, again, in folk religion in Japan, a rock can contain gods, machines can contain gods. And I think this is where people can view inanimate objects like robots much more easily as having some sort of a soul or some kind of a spirit attached to it than Westerners can, where it would seem kind of creepy and cruel and inhumane and unnatural to have a robot looking after grandma or trusting a robot to do something. I think it's much more intuitive that Japanese are more open to that. But that said, if Fujitsu is going to be doing the IT on it, I'm kind of worried if we're going to get there. It's kind of like people here are more primed and willing to accept it. But I really wonder if we can get it. So, coming back into the chat, Elon, you're fired. Oh, by the way, I got into some debates this week when I said I think that Elon's probably a horrible person, but there's some sort of a poll on who do you like better, Zuck or Elon. I don't really like either of them, but I think Elon's done more to make the world a better place than Zuck has. But Elon just strikes me as a raging a-hole. And it's not just based on Twitter, bashing and so on. It's based on, in America, you hear about, at the moment, or at least a month ago, I believe that there were no lawyers left at Twitter in North America. The stories I've heard from lawyers who have worked for Elon, I know people who have worked for Twitter and even who are, people who are there at the moment. Stories that I've heard, I've heard stuff worse even than what's in the public domain. So I'm convinced he's not a good person. Although at the same time, I'm pretty sure that's why he's successful. But I also see the way that he's tearing apart Twitter is kind of frustrating. And this is where I did install Threads. I'm on Threads, same handle name, Hiko Simon. You can find me there. Threads isn't going to be useful unless it gets third-party integrations. There again, if I can get Flipboard working with it, which I can't really do very well with Mastodon, I'll be up for it. But there again, I mean, I want Twitter always to succeed as a thing because it's anonymous, it's free, it was like a platform itself. It just integrated with everything, and you know, Elon's breaking all of that to try to get money out of it. But yeah, I don't know how that works. How making it worse is a good way to get money out of it. But that's a thing that's happening. Androvsky, I think robots succeeding us is the next step. Well, I think it's a step, Androvsky. I agree with you. It's, um, I mean, machines have been succeeding us for centuries. I mean, since the agricultural revolution, machines have been replacing people. You know, in fact, you could say since the printing press. I mean, yeah, literally. I mean, the agricultural, you know, thinking about how civilization emerged through the use of, you know, knowledge-based automation, being able to write, you know, the ancient Sumerians. That replaced the need for people to memorize, you know, religious scripts and laws and so on, being able to write it all down. People have been succeeded by writing, they've been succeeded by agriculture, they've been succeeded by industry, and even a lot of thinking tasks already. I mean, already people use Excel sheets because they, you know, they can't hold all the numbers in their heads or whatever. We use computers, and yeah, I think that AI is going to be another significant jump in that. But you know, they're not going to be able to replace us biologically. They're going to be another thing that's going to cause an advancement in civilization. But you know, remember, we've been working with this kind of tech for a long time now, so you know, I think robots are going to replace a lot of things that we do, but there'll be things that we want them to replace us in to begin with anyway. So I'm an optimist about all of that. Aaron, what is that link for? This is in it was Why the Files episode from this week. Oh, what is that about? Aaron, I blocked. Oh, creepy Chat GPT Sydney convo. Okay, I'll have a look at the link later on. Thank you for putting that in there. I will have a look at that later. Dan H. With the Japanese AI scene on YouTube, it's quite heavily pushed by Joichi Ito, the disgraced MIT professor. Yeah, Joichi Ito, he was associated with Creative Commons, which I used to be involved in, which is a worthwhile cause. I mean, you know, disgraced because he was friends with Epstein, but so was Bill Gates, so was Bill Clinton. I mean, a lot of people have been, you know, are disgraced by their association with Epstein. I mean, that said, doesn't change the fact that he knows what he's talking about on this. I mean, it's like, to me, it's a bit like Michael Jackson, you know, and his music. Um, you know, person who almost certainly did terrible things and yet made great music. And does that change how good the music he made was? It's, you know, George Ito, when he's in his lane and not making friends with pedophile pimps. Oh, God, it's just horrible to even think about. Um, you know, yeah, he's been promoting this, but he's been promoting this stuff for a long time, actually. I mean, he's been in the forefront of the, you know, yeah, again, he's as someone integrated in the Japan startup scene and with the connections with MIT, he's the sort of person that Japan frankly needs. I mean, you've either got him or the guy who founded Nicham. So, oh, this is so frustrating that I can't see my tweets. Just thinking, what do I do here? I'm going to disconnect this and give me a sec. Let me see if I can do something with this app here to fix it. Not now. It literally won't let me see more than, so maybe if I, okay, I got a way of doing this. Technical fixing on the fly. Boom, boom, boom. Oh. Okay, if I do it from the web, I can do it this way. And I can even do this. I can fix it manually. Oh, there we go. In fact, that actually works better. Ugh. Okay. So that is a solution. Anyway, I've got to get a better solution for this, which is something that if Zuckerberg provides me, I will do that. So anyway, other stories that have been getting my attention. Oh yeah, they were drilling for geothermal bore in Hokkaido, and that resulted in fact, I'm just going to fix one more thing. Let's try to maximize some of the real estate here. Boom, there we go. Cool. Man, I've done way too many tweets. They're trying to dig a geothermal bore in Hokkaido, and it caused a geyser of steam, which contained arsenic. This was in Niseko, where there's a lot of Australians. And 4 people have reported getting sick from probably the arsenic that was coming out of that. So that's not a good thing. And apparently that is a thing that quite often when you dig up onsens, they have toxic chemicals in them, and you've got to be careful of that. Skimming through other news from this week, we've got, a year since Abe was assassinated. I mean, that's flown by. I still continue to, Magdalena Osami points out that, there's been little progress made on addressing how this guy was able to make the guns himself that they used. Hey, Ben Duncan, good to see. From my perspective, I have a problem with the fact that, yes, the Unification Church has been an antisocial force, basically like operating like a religious cult, sort of Yakuza, sort of rip-off scam, happening in Japan for 30, 40, 50, 60 years even in Japan. They've been a toxic political influence, and they've been, I had been warned off them even before I came to Japan when they were involved. They own a lot of sushi chains, for example, overseas. They have lots of businesses that they invest in and run. And within that, they proselytize the religion, and they hook people in, and they ruin their lives and their families. And people have been saying action should be taken against them for decades. And action should have been taken against them for decades, but it's only when a victim, inverted commas, of a family member who was in the religion decided to take it out by assassinating the prime minister that the government decides, oh, you know what, the assassin was right, and we should do something about that. And while they've made very little progress on stopping these assassinations from being possible to happen, what they have done is the government's gone through and said, oh, you know what, the assassin was right, we should go fulfill all of his political aims. Which raises the question, they're worried about how can we prevent this sort of thing happening again? Well, maybe not giving them everything that they want. I mean, they should have done it anyway, and they should crack down on the cult. But the fact that the crackdown was so directly connected to people basically saying, well, yes, he shouldn't have assassinated the former prime minister, but he was right, and we should do as he says. Japan has a long history of political assassinations. Where the sort of politics and, including like before World War II, when there were a bunch of sort of fascist uprisings by young military officers in Tokyo, where the press and the public and even politicians said, you know what, those guys, they had a point. And everyone sort of went along with it. And Japan ended up in World War II at the end of that. And, how are you going to discourage people from doing assassinations when you give them exactly what they sought? And you sort of justify them post facto. That's the problem I have with that. Other stuff. My favorite ever legal movie, My Cousin Vinny. There's a great video on Legal Eagle with the writer of that, which is worth watching. Some other stuff in here. Some stuff talking about Elon. Threads. I'll be very interested to see if it works. How it goes, of course, it's being able to leverage the Instagram audience to start with. So, of course, I went and secured my account. But yeah, if they do third-party integrations and basically give us back all the things that Elon's taken away, that's going to make it interesting. Apparently, the UK is applying to join the TPP. I don't know how that makes sense, but there again, if the UK is in it, hey, why not Ukraine? Great to see, by the way, that Ukraine is making a lot of progress this week on pushing back Russia, particularly in areas around like Bakhmut and Zaporizhia, and I really hope that they kick the Russians out all the way off Crimea and everywhere out of Ukraine soon, and we keep giving them weapons to do it, because Russia should just go home. No one's saying that Ukraine is a perfect place before the war, but they shouldn't have been invaded. Joining the TPP, hey, why not? Dan H. It's either a weird cult or something industry. They are seen as kind of Japanese social safety net. The Toits Kyokai? the Unification Church. I mean, I suppose religions are seen as playing a kind of social safety net for, but there again, I mean, they basically predate on their members in terms of taking their income and stuff. So I'm not sure about that. But yeah, what else is in here? We've got other stuff that I found interesting this week. Oh yes, there's a tradition of mayors wearing funny hats we have here. Takizawa Mayor famous for watermelons. That happens. The tallest skyscraper in Japan apparently will only be the tallest skyscraper for a couple of years, but it's just gone up. It's close to Tokyo Tower, Azabudai Hills. It's another hills. One thing about this, it does remind me so much of. I recently rewatched. There's sometimes there are movies that are worth rewatching. In fact, this evening I rewatched the movie Nobody, which has Ben Odenkirk from Better Call Saul. Kind of a John Wick with Bob Odenkirk. Was really good. It's actually, I really like that movie. I think I like it actually better than John Wick. Another movie that's very rewatchable is the Dredd movie, the Judge Dredd movie with Carl Urban, not with Sylvester Stallone. And that's based on this future where everybody lives in these enormous skyscraper apartment blocks like this. But yeah. Oh yeah, because Dan H coming back. The unification, yeah, you had like, if you'd only two stars, I could have put together the sex industry. Are they sex industry? God, I don't even know. I mean, they have these mass weddings. They do lots of weird stuff. But anyway, I mean, to each their own, but that was a problem. Here's the stuff about Fujitsu, for example. The digital agency is going to be investigated. Basically, Taro Kono is going to be investigated over what was really actually Fujitsu's mess up, but all the political backlash happening on that. Oh, of course, the wastewater release. That was another big story this week. I should have mentioned that. So the plan has now been approved and signed off by the IAEA to release all of this treated wastewater from Fukushima into the ocean over the next 10 years, I think it is, or maybe even more than that. So yeah, they use this ALPS process to treat the water that was been used for cooling. Oh yeah, that reminds me of another thing. You should definitely. I finished watching a series on Netflix called The Days, which is a drama, basically a recreation of the events inside the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant from the time of the earthquake through basically to when they managed to get it to start to cool down. But after the two hydrogen explosions happened there, it's based on the testimony of the plant manager, the person in charge on site, following the accident, as well as various hundreds of interviews collected by journalists of people who were involved in the events there, and they put it together. They sort of dramatized some aspects of it, but it was for a Japanese drama, it was pretty well made and put together, and showed things about the events at Fukushima that I'd never heard of before. And super compelling, and really highlighted how close it was in many aspects to being much worse even than it was, and it was pretty bad. So that's something I highly recommend. If when I signed up for Netflix to watch Black Mirror, which was okay, the new series, it wasn't the best series. I was looking for other things to watch, and The Days is worth watching. The latest result of that, however, though, is that they are now, of course, preparing. They've been using cooling water to try to keep the reactor cool now for more than, for basically 10 years, 12 years, in fact. And they've stored all of this water on site, and it's been treated, and they've gotten all the contaminants out of it. So it's basically the same now as tritium wastewater used to cool any nuclear power plant. It's basically been filtered and used as a treatment process that nuclear power plants around the world use before they send coolant water out into the ocean, which is why nuclear power plants are always by the ocean. And yeah, the process that Japan has used has been checked and validated by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And the plan is that they're not going to release all the water at once. They're going to release it so that the volume of tritium going into the ocean is actually going to be spread out over a period of time, that it's going to be less, for example, than the annual nuclear power plant coolant emissions of tritium from Korea and China, for example, respectively emit into the ocean every year. But of course, in Korea, the amount of hysteria and fear about this is very high, and that was how the BBC disappointingly pitched it. Whereas, the IAEA says that this is all sort of checked and the science works out, and this will be safe, at least as safe as it is for any nuclear power plant to emit into the ocean. This is being done responsibly. China's exploiting it basically to get back at Japan for imposing sanctions on its semiconductor industry. they are now going to put nuclear contamination inspections on all Japanese food. So they're just playing this up for trolls and the Korean public, which has sort of been building up against this for a long time. Again, to the credit, the Korean government, which is trying desperately to improve relations with Japan, has actually endorsed the IAEA's finding that it is a scientifically sound and safe way to do this. And look, if you're in Japan and you are eating at like a restaurant or whatever, as much as if you go shopping, you might not buy Fukushima products. All of the restaurants and so on in places like Tokyo, all the company cafeterias are buying stuff from Fukushima right now. And it is safe. It's just no one wants to buy the label on it. But, the food is slightly cheaper as a result, which is why it's unavoidable. If you eat out ever in Japan, you're eating Fukushima stuff. And it's demonstrably safe. It's just got this terrible reputation, which of course this wastewater release is going to impact. But is it going to make me afraid of swimming near Tokyo or anything like that? No. I mean, it's no different to any other country that has it, to America or the UK or Europe or France that already emits wastewater. So there you go. We're 10 minutes over time. I'm going to quickly see if there's anything else that jumps out, but that was a big one, the wastewater release. Threads has been interesting. Yeah, China lectured. It's kind of funny. The day before the story, they lectured Japan. Hey, remember, you'll never be Western, so stop making friends with Western countries. Be friends with Asian countries. So Japan made friends with Taiwan, and then next day they're saying, don't be friends with Taiwan. I love the irony of that. IC cards, Suica cards are awesome. Shibuya Eggman, never forget. All sorts of stuff going on here, but I think those are the main stories I wanted to get. This guy, he's another new category I never thought of. A man married to Hatsune Miku, a imaginary, fictitious character, calls himself a fictosexual, and wants the public to accept people who want to marry their favorite anime characters. Why not? Why not? Have at it. I don't see any harm from it. I mean, again, we have to keep adding letters. I don't know. I feel like we're going to run out of letters at some point. We should just say, just you do you. Why not? Why not? I mean, honestly, he seems like a nice enough guy. But yeah, fictosexuals. That's a new one, but I like it. It kind of makes sense. I wonder. It's probably going to catch on. There are definitely people who would go for that. And is that all? Is that basically it for this week? I think we're getting back July 4. Oh. A lot of news this week, but anyway, I'm 10 minutes over, so that's it. The reverse culture shock, all that stuff. I know people have to go, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks for keeping me company. Thanks for throwing the peanuts, and thanks for the likes. We're going to have fictitious bathrooms. Why? I mean, yeah, we already have them, don't we? I mean, yes, we have fictitious bathrooms. I just the other day, I thought of a fictitious bathroom, and who knows, they might even become a reality at some point. So there we go. Androvsky, good to have you in the chat. Good to have everybody else in the chat. Ben Duncan, you'll be in Japan on the 19th of July. Well, everyone's coming into Japan right now. Hit me up if you're coming into town. Would love to, grab lunch or do something like that. Everybody, take care. Stay cool. I will talk to you all again same time next week. Remember that we've got Twitter Voyage is now back the first Sunday every month, and I'll be back here 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time every week with Tokyo Tonight going forward. Thanks for keeping me company. Have a good week, and boom, peace. Ending stream.